I'm such a firm believer in like this weird form of pessimistic optimism, or like nothing's wrong, nothing can really go wrong, and nothing will go wrong. And if something is wrong, you'll just find yourself doing what you need to fix it. And everyone's in their own stage of that.
Mm.
And if you can't see that in other people and apply it, then you're in your own trap.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I have Christopher here from Before the Crow's Nest is your YouTube channel name.
Yeah, it's just kind of a name I came up with when I left the church, because even then, we'll probably get into it, I was like, I kind of don't want Mormon in the name because I'm interested in like things that are connected to it, but not just it. So I need something a little offset. But anyway, so people call me Christopher, people call me Crow, whatever. It's a thing.
Awesome. So, yeah, for people that aren't unfamiliar with your work, first let's do like a 2-minute Mormon story.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not that interesting anyway. I'm born and raised Mormon, mixed faith household. My dad's side was Catholic, and he wasn't a member until after I had left the house and done college and stuff. But my mom raised us Mormon, and he was just kind of fine with it. And so, baptism, got the priesthood and all that. Went on a brief mission to Cape Verde in Africa. It's islands off the west coast. And I say brief because I have chronic pain problems, and volcanic rocky islands and what I was going through just like didn't mix. So the first presidency actually just, I guess they ended up saying, no, just send him home. And I did some like service temple stuff when I got home. And then I married an ex-Mormon a few years after that. And then 7 years later, I became an ex-Mormon. So that's the bullet point trajectory, I guess you'd say.
No way.
Yeah.
Pine Creek theorem holds then.
What is that? I don't think I know that one.
So I got into this like Christian apologetic stint, as well as ex-Christians. And so there's this channel called Pine Creek. I think it's just Pine Creek YouTube channel.
Okay.
An atheist guy. And the Pine Creek theorem is that I think women have converted more people to Christianity than the Bible, or I can't remember. It was basically women or something, and then they convert their partner or whatever, right?
I see. Okay. It was actually, I don't know, my wife didn't ever pressure me at all. We had a really ecumenical relationship. She was there when I ended up having questions and stuff. But there, yeah, we never really talked about it all that much. We just kind of lived our lives and didn't pressure each other one way or another. So I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So question, so you say your wife was ex-Mormon. What, the thing I've been thinking lately is like, okay, not so much defined by what we're not, right? So what is she like? What were her beliefs?
I mean, kind of like I just said, she just kind of like lives her life too. Like if someone asked her, she'd just kind of say, I guess I'm an atheist. Like I don't believe. We're kind of similar. Like don't believe in a god, but like something's going on that none of us understand. So,
Right.
yeah.
That sounds like that's how I feel too. And the other thing is when you use the atheist, it's almost the same as ex-Mormon, right? Like it's just like
Yeah.
I am, right?
And yeah, we both give atheists and ex-Mormons as much crap as we do believers. So.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, what were the stages that you went through? Like how did this all play out for you?
Well, I mean, I guess very Mormon of me, I'll just put it to a letter. The three C's. I was convinced as a kid, people would say indoctrinated. Um, and then I was conflicted as a teen, and then confused as an adult. And now I'm here.
Yeah.
I didn't have a fourth C, because after confusion, I think once you figure out why you're confused, we just just kind of go on with our lives, and that's its own journey. I haven't put any other letters to it, I guess.
You're still in it, I guess.
Yeah.
Still journeying.
Or
Did
I
you
don't
get
need it, or I don't need letters anymore. I just like the journey as it is. It's a language I don't know. Why put a letter on it in my own language, kind of thing.
Yeah. So relationships with family then has that been rough or fine or
Rough with my family, fine with like the in-law family, and that's more or less because my wife was out of it well before I came along anyway, so they had already had years under their belt of having their own discussions about it and whatnot, and so it wasn't really, they were happy, I guess, probably, that I came along and I was Mormon and she wanted to be with me. So at the time it was like an odd mix that it was probably, yeah.
I have that
And
in my
now
family. That's a different story, but go ahead.
and now it's, again, like I said earlier, like how my wife and I were, it's mostly ecumenical. We've had some discussions with things that have come up with family members, but it's all few and far between, and we just like love and accept each other. My family and I, we don't talk too much, and that's a much more complicated matter. Isn't even necessarily, there's things outside of it being connected to me having left the church and doing the things I'm doing now. So yeah, that's neither here nor there really. The relationships with like friends, and like I live right across from a church, and my neighbor's been in the bishopric and whatnot, like all fine and happy and living a good community lifestyle and getting along. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Not a are you don't miss like community aspects of
No,
you
no.
don't
I'm not
nothing.
that kind of person, and that's I've come to learn that's a much more personal thing. I don't meet many people who are as like that as I am, close to it, but they kind of get sick of it after a while. But
Interesting.
yeah, we'll probably get more into that later too.
Yeah. So yeah, bridge building with like ex-Mormons and members. Like, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know, that's what I'm interested in. I'm just curious if
Yeah,
you care, or you're just like people are gonna do what they do.
Well, they are gonna do what they do, but I guess if I was gonna say I cared about anything, it would be that more people recognize that, because there's just so many different people you can talk to and conversations you can have. Like, we have the people in the lobster group, they're so different from the people in Jacob Hansen's thoughtful faith group, and they're so different from all the ex-Mormons and Mormon stories and all the people in your group and Mormon discussions. Like, there's just too many ways to go about it. Everyone's doing their own thing, they're figuring it out how they need to, which was kind of a big thing for my wife and I. And she was really more a proponent of this, because as a member, there were times where I was like, I remember a missionary, I'm married to her, I gotta get her back, da, 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 da. But she was just like, no, everyone has their own path, like he'll figure it out eventually, I don't need to pressure him, I'll just deal with anything, it's not a big deal. And that's just how everyone's figuring it out. That's why we're here talking, that's why everyone has their channels doing their thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I feel like if you don't have bridges, though, you can't figure that out, right? Like you start labeling this thing like, oh, they're evil, like they're bad, and I'm good, and the people that think like me are good, and the people that think like not like my tribe, not good, right?
Absolutely.
So I guess that's why when I think of bridge building, it's not about bringing people to my side, or you know what I mean? It's more just about recognizing that there are different
Yeah, well, I guess the more the reason I started to frame it that way was because sometimes, depending on the people or group of people or person, whatever you're going to be talking to, approaching the discussion, you're going to be building a different type of bridge, or you
Yeah.
might not be able to build a bridge, or you might just be chopping down a log and walking across a very precarious ravine. There's just too many ways about it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yes.
the bridge building does need to happen more and more. And I was just talking to Chris Hanna on his channel about that. The episode hasn't gone up yet. I don't really remember what I said, but we kind of got into this too. We're interested in the same conversation too. We want, because there's even bridges that need to be built in the ex-Mormon world. A lot of ex-Mormons don't like to hear the things we have to say. At least that's how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a lot of bridges that we could build.
You messaged this. You said, where do you go when your foundations are uprooted, but the building still stands? And so, yeah, I wanted you to explain that a little bit. I don't know what you mean by the building still stands, because to me, like everything collapsed. There are pieces, little tiny pieces all over, and I had to rebuild stuff, right? So what is the building that's still standing, I guess?
Well, I'd say that the imagining that it has crumbled and that there is something to rebuild is the quintessential trap, because that's it, just in different words saying we can frame it like a Catholic Christian way, or even or a Mormon way, whatever. We've come into this world, and it's crumbled. We're born into sin. We have to get baptized. We have to rebuild and follow these rules to get back to God. And when you lose that, it's just the same thing all over again with different words. I've been born into this ex-Mormon world, and I've been taught I've been coming from nothing but sin, but if I just rebuild it this way, I'm fine. And it's just the same thing all over again. So when I say the building still stands, it's because you are who you are. Just because you're saying you're an ex-Mormon now, it doesn't really change anything. You're that Mormon building that's been built this whole time. You've
Oh,
just
sure.
slapped. It's like going over to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and just like slapping a new banner on it, Community of Christ, just because you want it to be. That's not what it is.
That's
So that's,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've been thinking of it differently. It's almost like I feel like we are, to me, that sounds like there's some true me, like that I have some true, I am something, right? When
Yeah, it's, yeah.
that's even complicated, because it's like, in fact, I've been wondering, like, what does it even mean to be my true authentic self? Because when I get down to the bottom of that, like, I am, my experiences growing up that are all influenced by my community and the people I've touched and the things I've learned, the things that people have taught me. Like, I'm not even sure who Marty is, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
just like a conglomeration of a lot of different things, a lot of different little identities that are all fighting each other, trying to, I don't know. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it does. And I mean, we can kind of go back to, I mean, when I left, and that's been one of my big problems. We talked about like how I don't really need a community. And
Mm-hmm.
just briefly, I mean, and I do, everyone needs a community.
Sure.
So I'm not saying, yeah, I'll specify.
That wasn't the one you missed, though.
Yeah. Um, like I need this community because I need a grocery store to feed my family and that kind of thing. But as far as like leaving the church and that kind of community, that kind of support group,
It just,
where to start?
well,
Yeah, I guess it's more because I guess another one of those aspects that's just ingrained, especially in Mormonism. Because I've had friends of many faiths, and it's not as tight knit as it is in Mormonism, as far as building a community and relationships with those around you, and supporting each other in those callings. And yeah, every member a missionary, and getting the sacrament to those who can't make it. That kind of thing, that kind of support group. It's just ingrained that it's needed. And again, I'm not saying it's not. In many regards, it is, and inevitably it is in many ways. But when it comes to a time to reconsider whatever you're labeling it, I'll just make it easy. Whatever you're deconstructing or reconstructing, a lot of people, they don't think to consider some of the lessons that they learned in Mormonism may still be applicable. And Christ is just still a great example for many of those things. When he was having some of his biggest trials, or when he had to do the things we, believed he had to do for us, he went out alone and he told his community to, stay off to the side and support me while I do this. And there's many of those kind of considerations in there in some of his parables, like consider the lilies. And they just do their thing, they toil not. And there's, you can say whether or not they follow me, as far as an ex-Mormon, you don't want to follow Christ again, but what is that? What does it mean to consider the lilies? It kind of means to take time to yourself, to solitude, whether you want to go out in nature and be that kind of an ex-Mormon and just let yourself. It's funny that this word came to mind, thrive, when I have such specific issues with that kind of convention for ex-Mormons, when I think jumping from one community to another, when all those people in that community haven't figured it out either, whether or not there is beneficial support there. If you're trying to get down to the brass tacks of who's Marty, who's Christopher, what am I, if I'm not this Mormon pre-existent person I've been for 30 some odd years or whatever it is, I don't think any of that's helpful. It takes the solitude, it takes being alone and communing with nature and considering the lilies and any and all of that. And I kind of wandered a lot through that. I don't know if any of that made sense or if you had any.
Well, I think I do kind of understand what you mean by the building still stands, because I remember having that wish that my family could know that, like, I'm still me. I haven't changed. Like, I'm not going to be participating over here, and I know that's not predictable anymore, but that's one thing I wish that I could convey. And it's taken time. I think most of our friends and family have recognized that we haven't changed a whole lot, right?
Yeah, and
But
it does take time for sure.
For them to realize that. But like, I knew that pretty early on. Like, I haven't changed a whole lot. Like, my values are the same. In fact, it's your values that are like, oh, this is hard to, right? I'm confused about this because my values are contradicting here, and I'm not able to grow in the way that I feel like I need to grow without making a lot of people upset.
Yes, no, 100%.
Yeah. So I do kind of understand, but at the same time, I guess maybe that's just a different subject of
it probably
just
is
us being made up of what's around us, because whatever made me up, like, that hasn't changed. Like, my history is still the same.
Exactly, agreed. And yeah, there's even different angles we can get on that, if whether we want to go science route and talk about nature, nurture, genetics, or for me, a lot of my journey afterwards, I stumbled into meditation and Zen, and a lot of what I say when, like, the building still stands and that kind of language, it is very yin yang Zen kind of approach, which can be confusing, but valuable, I think, once you see it that way. See, Zen for me was very, very nice because I can't think of the words right now, but order and chaos doesn't jive really. There's more fluidity and spontaneity and becoming than there is any definite order or arbitrary nothingness.
After listening to just a few of your episodes and a bunch of your content, I recognize you are definitely on the more creative side. At least that's what it seems like. I am not.
Yeah, I grew up a theater kid, and both my parents are writers, and I wrote a lot in college. And I used to write plays and stuff, so I tend to lean more that way, no matter what I'm writing.
It's interesting that you look at it that way, because that's one thing that I stumble with. Like, it's like, I want the rules, give me the rules so I can follow them. I
And
want
that,
them.
yeah, that's just another one of those really hard things to detach from, because yeah, we had the standards of living, we have this for the strength of youth and the law of chastity and the word of wisdom and all
It's
of
not
that.
even
And
that level. It's
well,
not
no,
even
it's
that
not,
level.
I
It's
know
and
those are just the basic
everywhere I look,
examples.
I'm trying to formulate what's the rule here, and then I follow that rule. Not that I'm not willing to update it, right? But
Yeah,
I need to formulate it and know what it is, and then I'll start doing it, and then if, you know,
and there is nothing wrong to that, I guess. There is, in the end, though not, I wouldn't say a finite or final end, there is an order to things, but it again wouldn't be, I wouldn't say it'd be arbitrary or chaotic.
So I don't know if you went through like a crazy phase where you couldn't get enough like of um, learning about church history or
Ooh,
learning
no.
learning
Mm-mm.
about all the facts. You never went through that phase.
No, and maybe that is probably a key factor, I'd say, in a lot of what I have to say about the deconstruction reconstruction traps. And it is hard to frame, and that's why I wrote something. I don't know if you've listened to it or skimmed it at all. It's called the Epistle of Christopher, and
And yeah, go ahead.
it is really difficult language, and a lot of it comes from when I was really heavy in like a type of Zen, and it isn't necessarily presented as Zen, though there is some of that in there, but it is just really hard to frame how you fall into this trap, because it is hard to see. That's why it's a trap. So when I was leaving, I didn't go ex-Mormon study. I went Christian. I read everything ex-Christian, not ex-Mormon. So I was reading things by Seth Andrews and Christopher Hitchens, and I was just avoiding anything that was CES letter to my wife, whatever. See, I can't, those are the only two I can really think of. Like, I wasn't listening to Mormon Stories podcast or RFM. I knew they existed. I was listening to things like The Thinking Atheist with Seth Andrews, and I tried like Matt Dillahunty and that kind of stuff, but even that wasn't really what I was into.
Mhm.
Like, getting down to the nitty gritty of debating the Bible wasn't really my thing. And Seth Andrews did some of that, but he had more thoughtful things for me back then. Um, and it wasn't until about 9-10 months after I had like fully, I don't remember if at that point I was like, yeah, I'm an atheist at this point. But I had started going more on ex-Mormon spaces online, and I just kept seeing CES letter, read the CES letter, the CES letter is amazing. I was like, fine, I'll read it. And so I went through it on a bus ride to work, and then the other half on a bus ride back home. And
It wasn't surprising, right?
not really. There was one where I was like, huh, I kind of like that one. I don't even remember the specifics. It was something to do with translations in comparison to the Bible, with the new, and I can't remember, but yeah, it was just underwhelming.
Yeah,
And
the thing that none of it was surprising, right? I had this hope that that stuff wasn't real, like not real. How do I word this? I had this hope that 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 stuff, if I looked into it, wouldn't be found. Does that make sense? But
yeah,
after
mhm,
reading it, because I was still hoping the church was true, it's how I would put it by the time I got to that. And the thing that killed my loyalty to the church was the mantle is far greater than the intellect. I talk about that a lot because
yeah,
that is where I lost my loyalty to the organization, because the whole time I'm thinking, I don't have to be a literal believer. That's fine. Like, that's not what it's about, right?
yeah,
But once I found that out, like, it's
yeah,
not an
yeah.
organization we're supporting.
Where could we jump off from there? Let's see.
Well, I guess I wonder if people that get into that hole. So I guess when I was just consuming all the things, right? I couldn't get enough. And I had a moment where I realized I can still like picture looking up from the computer and looking up and just realizing my life is still happening around me.
Yeah,
This that I'm reading about, like on all my spare time, it doesn't matter. Like I still have to do all of the responsibilities that I have around me, right? Like this doesn't matter, but this over here does. And so it's like I was like snapped out of it or something. And then my interest, I mean, there's still things that if I hear about, like, oh, that's interesting, but I can't say that I crave it. I was craving it for a while. Couldn't get enough
Yeah,
of it.
I for a second I had like little waves of craving, or like something would spark it in me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's much less and less. It would probably take something pretty big uh for another
Spark
wave
your
to be.
interest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm in a pretty deep trough right now. um but uh some of it's not even to say that, because it's devastating for a lot of people to find out any and all of that, whether it's polygamy or racism or problems with the family proclamation and or whatever it is. And so it's not, we have these conversations, and sometimes in the back of my head I'm like, you sound like an asshole. I'm such a firm believer in like this weird form of pessimistic optimism, or like nothing's wrong, nothing can really go wrong, and nothing will go wrong. And if something is wrong, you'll just find yourself doing what you need to fix it. And everyone's in their own stage of that.
Mm,
And if you can't see that in other people and apply it, then you're in your own trap. That's not even the trap of just reading history over and over again. There are
mhm.
a lot of traps that you can fall into. um,
Right.
that one I'd also label, just because I know certain people will be listening, as a false trap of shadow work, which is another conversation. If you can't apply that, but you're really into shadow work, you're not really into the real kind of shadow work.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that's any kind of conversations you listen to.
I,
It's
I
becoming more and more, but it's still newer for a lot of people.
well, I might be understanding it incorrectly, but that you need to integrate like just things, all parts of yourself. So if there's a part of you that you're not liking or something, instead of ignoring it, you should integrate it. That's my understanding, but
Yeah, that's the general understanding, and my I would just point out that that's a wrong understanding of what it means to integrate whatever shadow you think you have, because this just rounds back to, who are you? And if you don't know who you are, who the hell is this shadow you're talking about? Whether it's an animus or the shadow itself or the trickster, or you don't know what you're talking about if you don't even know who you are, which
mm,
is no one, but also you, because of who you grew up to be as this Mormon ex-Mormon you now are. It's a
mm-hmm,
complicated matter
mm-hmm.
with a lot of traps, but here we are, kind of opening the doors for people so they can jump out.
Or jump in, right?
Yeah, true, true. One eternal round.
So, um, yeah, so this is just a little criticism of growing up, at least how I felt growing up in the church. It's like I feel like there's these natural steps, natural things you have as you grow up. You know, you update your model of what the world is as you start to learn more about what's going on. And then you could hit places where I felt like I couldn't be a good member and update the way
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to update it, right? Like, um, yeah, I've talked about this. I don't know if I've talked about it on this channel. I definitely talked about it to people, but that's what I felt like Jordan Peterson allowed me to do. He said, just to be honest, right? And honesty is this policy. He doesn't say it like that. He the way he frames being honest is really great because he doesn't say tell the truth. Well, he does, but then he says, or at least don't lie, because the truth is actually really hard, right? That's the truth is
Yeah,
nobody knows what the truth is, but we can at least not lie about what we think it is. We can at
exactly.
least not
Yeah.
mislead ourselves and those around us. And
Mm-hmm.
then the more people we have doing that, hopefully we can get closer to a better model that
And I do like that, because, and even the way you phrase that, whether that's you or Jordan Peterson, because there's a lot of misleading yourself as a Mormon, I think. And I give this example when I'm talking to friends. I don't know if I've ever really made a video or anything about it, or written about it, but when for priesthood holders and giving priesthood blessings, sometimes, and a lot of people have, said, they have a similar experience. So often there's this voice in the back of your head, whatever it is, that wonders and argues or whatever. Is this me, or is this God? Is this the Holy Spirit? Will this blessing help this individual? And there's all this anxiety that comes with it. Um, and those are little ways that you can mislead yourself, even as a Mormon. If you believe it, that's a little stray path that you're going down. And those same little voices in the back of your head when you're discovering things as an ex-Mormon and reading history, or wondering about your personal history, you tend to get off on the same stray paths and questioning the faith you have in your Mormonism and your ability to perform the priesthood blessing, or your trust in these new sciences that you're discovering, and leading yourselves astray during, with little conversations. I think those are things that people know that are there, but really struggle to recognize and bring to the surface.
Don't want to throw all members under the bus. And it's not that the correlated material, it's so interesting because it's like, but that's the roadblock you hit. Like you realize, for example, as you get older, and I feel like it's a growing up thing to realize how much you don't know, right? Like you go, and the older you get, you realize the more you don't know. And then all of a sudden you're struggling with, why did I used to know the church was true and now I don't? Like,
yeah.
Like, and even though that's like a natural growing up thing, just, I don't know.
No, that was a big phrase for me the first couple of years after I left. Was I just had to convince myself that not only I don't know what I don't know, that is the exact same for everyone around me. And that really helped me. That was an early recognition I had. And that really helped me get through like an anger phase of Mormonism and wanting to fight and battle certain conversations with friends or family members because they don't know what they don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know for 28 years.
Yeah.
And that was a big lesson that I learned.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing is that there are people that maybe have had that realization, and just because you see them practicing as a Latter-day Saint, you can't just assume they haven't had that lesson yet in life, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be a wrong assumption to make as well. Like, so it's just, exactly, you just don't. So, but
yeah, well,
because of probably my personality and my rule following, I think that in order for me to maintain the belief, I don't know that I could have learned that lesson. Like I feel like I had to get rid of that belief before I could make that step.
Yeah, 100% agree. And there is a flip side. You said like kind of in Mormonism we're taught pretty much every other faith or belief system out there has some form of truth.
Right.
They just don't know what they don't know. But we've got it.
That's right.
It's same game, different name. When you're on the outside and then you realize, oh, I don't know what I don't know. In this, in one way, if we're gonna really get down to what I am, to say I don't know what I don't know is itself a trap again. I'd say, which is another road we could go down, because who am I to not know what I don't know?
I don't know. Keep going down that road. Let's hear it.
Well, what were your questions about, who is Marty earlier? Like how exactly, because there are a couple ways we could go down this road. I could get very Zen with it, or we could.
Oh, actually, I'm glad you said Zen. Explain to me what Zen is, because I'm not sure I know what you mean by Zen. I thought that was I thought I knew, but then you're describing it in a way that I don't understand.
Like so I use it as like a blanket statement for like Eastern approach to meditation, more specifically things like things that are called like a Zazen meditation, which is just a sitting, no conceptualizing while you're meditating, or Taoist approaches, and techniques like Vipassana and Dogen, those kind of very specific, but I just kind of use a blanket Zen because I mentioned Zazen meditation, which is probably the closest to what I'd say I practice in my day to day. But in my thoughts and approaches and wonderings on language and hearing several like Taoist and actual like Japanese Zen monks describe that practice in their own words, I found language traps in and of themselves. And I've said in other places, I don't practice Zazen meditation. I practice Mushin meditation, which is the same thing in a kind of an Eastern joke. So yeah, when I say Zen, it's kind of a blanket statement for an Eastern meditative approach for me, who's still a Westerner.
Well, so are you talking about like a state of meditation that you
Nirvana
reach?
or
Yeah, like,
samadhi?
is that what you mean by when like?
No, because if you think you are going to reach some state of something, you're missing the point again. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay. So I didn't read everything Sam Harris, but I did use his waking up app for a long time, and I listened to his Making Sense podcast for a long time. I liked him more as a speaker than a writer. Actually, so I tried to read some of his things. I read all of The Moral Landscape. That's the one I made it all the way through, but the other ones and just ended up kind of getting bored.
So Zen, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it
Zen and I
is it related? Is Sam Harris touching on?
Yeah, and it's been a while since I've talked to anyone really about Sam Harris's point, so I probably should. That'd probably be a conversation Chris Hanna and I would have. Because once I got so far into Sam Harris's kind of meditation practice, I started noticing little things in his arguments where I thought he was contradicting himself or missing his own points that he was like teaching in his meditation, his guided meditations. Nothing really major, but it would also just translate to his debates and conversations with other people like Jordan Peterson, which other people like Paul Vanderklay and others rightly try to point out. But he's probably the closest to anything I'd be saying in this realm as far as if anyone's gonna get at what I'm saying, though there are plenty of ex-Mormons who just relentlessly preach like Sam Harris free will and determinism things, which completely contradict anything he has to say about meditation practices and who you are as a self. And it's evident that the people who cling on to these certain arguments with free will and meditation haven't gone down those other roads that he's presented.
Yeah, like this is a fun tangent.
I kind of formulated my own little term where I say I'm a functional determinist. I'm not a determinist, but I'm not what I would say is a non-functional determinist or a non-functional non-determinist, which are just other little silly phrases I made to go along with my functional determinism, because it just became, which is also not compatibilism, which is a kind of more complicated thing to explain, which people don't often talk about when we're discussing free will and determinism. But the more I meditated and tried to wonder who the hell I am, and comparing that to the pre-existence of Mormonism and anything I had been experiencing, and whether or not I'm choosing to sit down and meditate on these things of my own volition or free will, or if because 29 years ago, it was already set in the fabric of the universe that I would sit down in a green chair in my master bedroom and have this realization as an ex-Mormon. It just, the complexities of either side of that. And I really didn't, until I wrote something this year, just last month, didn't fully understand my own universal scope and breadth of what I meant by functional determinism, which is to say, you are in a determined world to a large degree. But we do, like you said, we're floating around whatever is going on here with all these feelings that I'm choosing to reach over and take a sip of water now, or have the relationships we do, or to leave the church. But any and all of that, the reason you can just meld the two. I do have the free will to make certain choices, but it was determined. A lot of it was before I could make a lot of those choices. And maybe connecting some of the Zen, which isn't even fully Zen. It's actually a phrase I got out of the I Ching, which is a Confucian text. It's not a Taoist text. They actually kind of have a lot of counterpoints. But the I Ching has a lot of good things to say in this one section in particular. And it talks about how we are all born into a prepotent system of relationships. You were born a Mormon, and you can't change that. That's why the building still stands. And when you were a Mormon, you had the free will given to you by God to act as you pleased. But if you were going to do it in the Mormon frame, which is a determined set of doctrines and principles and standards that lead you one direction, it's determined, it's set there, it's unchanging. God doesn't change that stuff. It's a prepotent system of relationships. You're born into that. You have the free will to choose how you want to go through that path, how you want to propel your life towards being prepared to go on a mission and get married through the temple. And when, like how we started this conversation, when it feels like the building crumbles, that is you. And again, maybe this is a language trap, because we could say you're being born again into a new prepotent system of ex-Mormon relationships, and you're now free to act in this determined world outside of that Mormon frame. That's one way I'd try to start describing it. Though on a universal scale, there's a lot to it. And like I said, I just wrote a little book that gets a lot deeper into this. I actually hadn't never quite tried to frame it that way, because it is very complex, but that's, in a nutshell, functional determinism. You were born into a determined Mormon family. You had no choice in the matter. You didn't choose that. You had no free will, but you were free to act as a human Mormon until you were free to act as a human ex-Mormon. And that just continues.
That's interesting. So you're saying that things are determined. That's interesting.
Yeah, because before we were here on Earth, if we're gonna get even before we had an I am, and for Mormons that's complicated because we had a pre-existent I am. So if you're an atheist and you don't believe in an afterlife, your conversation you have to have a starting point to your prepotent system of relationships, oddly enough. And if your starting point is a nothingness, that's a different tangent. I don't think I want to go.
Oh yeah. Well, no, but the fact that we're even here, like that I get a lot of awe. I have a lot of awe. Like why is there something rather than nothing? Like that question. In fact, I remember being a kid and staring out the window and having I think it must be easier to meditate as a kid or something like that, because
Absolutely.
I feel like I was able to get into a headspace, and actually scared me a few times, because it's like I got so like, I was like, I'd look out and I'd be like, what if there was nothing? Like, what if there was
Oh,
no
this is
earth?
beautiful.
What if there was no stars? What if there was no God? Like, what if there was absolutely nothing? And then and things would just go blank. And then I'd snap out of it, and I'd have a really scared feeling. I was like, whoa, that was scary. But
Yeah, so
I've
I've
not been able to do that as an adult though. Like maybe when I was maybe 10 or younger. I don't know. Like it's been a long time.
yeah, so there's one thing you said in particular. What if I looked out and there was nothing? Is that how you worded
No,
that?
what if there was nothing?
What
Like
if
what if
there
there
was
was,
nothing?
yeah, what if there was nothing? Like what if I wasn't here? What if the ground wasn't here? What if the earth wasn't here? What if the stars weren't here? And you just kind of get bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden like just feels.
Yeah, I, there are a lot of routes we can take, and I love this kind of conversation. But to take a step back, and I don't remember what I changed this to because this was 3.5, 4 years ago. But I remember the question, wondering the question, why is there something rather than nothing? Um, and Zen taught me that that was kind of a bad question, though I
Mm,
can't remember really the replacement question. And it might not be that we need a question. It's rather that there is something and there is also nothing. And the reason you kind of piqued my interest, and I said it was kind of beautiful, because to look out and wonder what it would be like if there was nothing. Because in meditation, if you close your eyes, it looks like there is nothing there.
hmm.
But a lot of my meditation practice has been with eyes open, and I stumbled across a practice. I had this realization, like you're describing, as a child, you can just kind of get into that much more simply. Um, and I see here psychedelics is kind of involved. Psychedelics helped me better frame it and understand it, but I had this realization kind of too before. Um, and I came across a practice of meditation called the Headless Way. And once I read the first chapter of this book called On Having No Head by D.E. Harding, he had all the words for what I had seen, which was to realize that you can't see your own head. No matter what, you can't see your own face. Every time you look out of this nothing, you see all the something. All the something comes to this nothing that you can't see, that everyone else
Mm.
can see. And so, like you and I here, while we're looking through these cameras, we can see each other's faces, but we can't see our own. And
I
that's
can
as
see a video of my face, but
well,
that's not
yeah,
the
that's
same
the
thing.
tricky. No,
No, no, it's
but
not the same
for,
thing
yeah,
though. It's not the
it's
same thing at
not.
all. You know, it's not the same thing when you have a Zoom call with someone and you
And
realize they're not really there either, right? Like
mhm.
you're not even really here.
And a lot of
Like computer
people
screen.
and a lot of people will suggest against it, but I'm very much a proponent for
I can
meditation,
see them in my
eyes
nose
open, in front
and
of
my
the mirror.
cheeks.
Yeah, and that's part of the headless way conversation, actually. But you don't see a nose as a nose. You're just seeing this
Half a nose.
pinkish weird smudge. That's not actually a nose. That's just a smudge of skin that goes
Huh,
all the way from the ceiling to the floor. It's not a nose that you see when you see someone else. That's not a nose.
that's true. It's what
Um,
a nose might look like if you were looking from this angle at someone's
yeah,
nose.
yeah. There are ways to go about that. But so that's one of those Zen lessons where you can see that everything, it's not that there is something rather than nothing. It's that all of something is born from nothing, which is also something. And that was why it was so important for the Romans and numbers to get zero and figure that out, because through zero, even if you write it down and like cut it out, through nothing you see everything, which is the point of your face. Through this nothing you can't see, you see the whole world. And when you
Hmm.
see someone else's face, you're just seeing a reflection of yourself. And in that specific meditation practice, the phrase is kind of like a namaste, though there was some like ashram back in India where this guy visited, and his phrase is, I am space for you. because all of space, it exists here for each individual. And so when you come across another human, you are space literally for that human. And that gets into space and time being kind of a mirage rather than illusion. But this whole ashram, instead of saying like namaste as a greeting and stuff, they changed it to I am space for you, because it was so poignant to the message.
That's cool.
And that's a lot of complicated threads pinning what I am and what's free will. And
I know we didn't get to the bottom of what I am, huh?
Well, it's difficult too.
Yeah. Have you found a spiritual home then? Like, do you feel like these practices are your spiritual home? Are you like a spiritual home of one, or maybe it's you and your wife and your family? Like,
yeah,
does that make sense when I say spiritual home?
Yeah, we're all our own like individuals here, but we're also a unit. My wife and
I would describe spirituality. It's funny because I had an aversion to that word for a while, but it's just useful term. I find that spirituality is something along the lines of becoming.
Yeah, and I like becoming. I use becoming a lot.
Yeah. But I feel like you can't just become on autopilot. Like you have to turn off your autopilot and direct where you want to become, if that makes sense. And that's, I feel like you have, I don't know, some people do it naturally, but it seems like we need spiritual practices in order to do that, so we don't get stuck in ruts and don't get stuck in autopilot.
Yeah, that's autopilot's a good way of reframing determinism. If you recognize that you're on autopilot in this system, then you take the reins and you functionally determine how you're going to move forward. And we can even bring AI into here with Teslas with an autopilot. You can engage and disengage that autopilot, but
it's useful too, because it's too much stuff going on really to be paying attention to everything all at once.
And you're in that prepotent system of freeway relationships. You're in a car, it's determined you've got to go this direction on this side of the road and follow these rules. But if you have autopilot to help you, and you can functionally determine that you're going to engage that and stay focused, that's an option.
And you won't feel stuck doing it either.
Yeah, so that's another way for, if people were super confused at anything I was saying earlier about functional determinism, that's another way to reframe it.
Yeah, that's a my level way to say it. But yeah, like, so would you say that, so meditation, you've taken up some how often do you do that?
Oh, it was pretty much like I've done it a couple times just during this. It's just something you can do, which I think is a big point, because if you don't realize that it's something you can do at any moment for whatever purpose you may need, then you're not, again, understanding what meditation is for. It's not a 10-minute session every morning or a 20-minute session at night or something you do out in nature to make you feel good. It can be. You do need a formal practice like that.
I guess I'm wondering, in the beginning. When you say you've done it during this interview, so I guess you can't do it unless you've had the practice to be able to do it, right? Like you can't just, you know what I mean?
Yes and no. And this again kind of gets into complicated I am and recognizing the observer and seeing yourself meditate and whatnot, but it goes into you do it all the time. It's like when you were a kid, and the Headless Way talks about that a lot too. One of the stages that actually says is you're the infant, and then the child, and then the adult, and then the seer, like 4 basic stages. And the child, they just fall into it all the time. That's why they can be a cat and they kind of really think they're a cat with their own cat. They fall into those patterns and they get lost. And when they're just sitting in the car driving or just staring into space, they see the world coming into that nothing, because they don't have so many of the words that we do for all the things that are coming their way. And parents who are listening can notice this. If you've ever had a moment with your child where they're pointing at something and saying, "What is that?" and you can't figure out what they're pointing at, it's just because they're seeing something in such a way that language hasn't reframed it for them to see it in that context. Because they've dropped into that mode of seeing just light come and accumulate in a certain pattern, and shapes form differently. And that can vary culture to culture. That can be a complicated matter too. But
well, I'm reading Britt Weinstein's book right now for a book club, and he talks about that. He talks about how depending on, like, you can't judge the size of lines or something like that until you get somebody that didn't grow up in a Western society, and then all of a sudden they don't fail the test. That it's an optical illusion that only depending on how you grew up changes the optical illusion.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. I've seen those kind of things too. And some of it has to do with I think architecture of the civilization and in the areas
straight
you grew
lines
up in.
and stuff.
Yes, straight lines versus other things.
Super crazy. And you start learning stuff like that, and you just realize again, like, how much you don't know. And it gives you a lot of humility as far as other people's perspectives. Maybe they really are seeing something that you can't see, like you maybe can't see it because of the way you grew up, right?
And I've really gotten that in that place. Sorry, it took me a minute to say, but and I can probably cap that off with kind of like my new spiritual home, because a lot of it does have to do with and Chris Hanna, and I think this was the episode, just he and I, we both just kind of, Mormonism's real. All those millions of people who are living it, it's real, and it's real for them. And a lot of the spiritual home I've reached is allowing them to see the miracles they see in their lives, because I would hope that they wish the same for me. And a lot of the miracles and spiritual things I've seen in my life since leaving aren't far off of what Mormonism taught me anyway. And so how can I had some amazing spiritual experiences that I still don't deny to this day very openly. If anyone who's read or listened to some of my stuff will have ideas. So I can't find that I can deny them any of that, or really critique them for holding and seeing those things, because I hold and see things still too. And I want to be accepted for them regardless,
No, that's true.
My spiritual, a lot of my spiritual home has fallen into just that kind of recognition, and a lot of it was through Zen and meditation and a lot of psychedelics too.
It's been fun chatting though. That's been fun getting to know you a little bit too. I've been in the comment section a lot, but
I've really I was going down Vervaeke's channel, and then you popped up among some of my Facebook stuff, and then Vervaeke was on your channel.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, awesome. And it was a great episode. And then I went through all your stuff, and you just had Hannah and Flip on, which was a great episode as well.
I recorded that so long ago. I didn't realize how long it had been.
Well, it was good and poignant nonetheless.
Yes.
So yeah, it's been great to chat.
I liked the way that Flip put that, and I didn't realize that he said it until I rewatched it. Just the fact that it's like, what are you doing here, right? Like, why just can't leave it alone? Can't leave exmormonism alone, right?
Yeah, yep.
It's just like, oh, you're not the only one that's like feeling, just trying to help others feel like they're not crazy. And that's what I liked about Mormon Stories when I watched it. Was listening to those interviews and hearing people go through the same experiences. Oh man, there was what is the satire website? Babylon Bee?
Yeah. Wait, is that the one? Yeah.
I just saw a headline of a video, and it said something along the lines of evangelical has unique deconstruction story. It sounds just like all the others.
Oh, I've seen something like that along those lines though. Yeah.
But it just made me laugh because it's so true. But the thing that is nice to hear other people say that is because then you don't feel like you're crazy. You're like, oh.
Yeah, and there is, to tie back along that, there is something to that, and hearing other people have similar experiences or discover the same history and have the same problem with it or whatever, and just be like, yes, thank you. And sometimes that's all you need.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. So I really liked flips. That's why I cut that out and put it at the beginning of my episode.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true, Flip. I can't. You're right. Anyways, well, it's been fun chatting, and we'll probably see you around. Any
definitely.
final words for people? Like, what any advice, wisdom that you can bestow upon those that have made it this far?
Get over yourself, stop taking yourself so seriously, and consider the lilies, but don't follow Christ necessarily. And have a good time. Enjoy your life. Yeah, do what you please, but stop taking yourself so seriously, because who are you?
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, have a good one.